Hello and welcome to Transform Faster with Storage as a Service. Today's webinar is sponsored by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and GigaOM and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech and I'm excited to be your moderator for this discussion panel. Now, before we get to today's great content, we have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you may be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues. But if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a Sonar report, which is research from GigaOM that will be the foundation of much of the discussion today. Valuable resources that you're entitled to for free by virtue of attending today, so be sure to grab that one. Also, there's a really nice buyer's guide on storage as a service from HPE. Just a great pair of resources today on STaaS, so please take advantage of those. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get to today's timely discussion. So it's an honor to introduce you to today's all-star panel. We have Tim Desai, who's in GreenLake Storage Product Marketing for HPE. We also have Howard Holton, CTO at the research and consulting firm GigaOM, and Daryl Kent, Field CTO for GigaOM. So it's great to have you all here. Tim, take it away.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to an engaging conversation with Howard and Daryl about key industry trends and buyer priorities related to storage as a service. The foundation for what we'll be discussing today is a recently published report from GigaOM called the Sonar Report for Storage as a Service. So let's establish a foundation for our upcoming conversation by first providing an overview of the Sonar Report and some of GigaOM's key takeaways. Daryl, would you like to start?
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. I'm going to be sharing my screen here. So as Tim stated, this is the Sonar report. We put it under cloud infrastructure management, as you can see here. The analyst here was Justin. This is our third storage as a service Sonar report, our third iteration, third year, if you will. And the Sonar report itself, if you were to page through this, is about 19 pages. I'm not going to do that. Many people will read all of that. So we put these sections up here that you can go to relative to how to navigate it itself. Now, typically, what most people look at when they look at a storage as a service or any of our sonars is they immediately come to this graphic. We're going to come back to this because it is important. But what I want to do is just let you know there are various things within this this sonar that are pertinent and important. How to the use cases, the overview of STaaS itself. I'm going to go through some of this, and we will get through the report itself. So what I'd like to do is let's establish what STaaS is, our definition of it, why it's important. The sonar itself, how to read it, and then we will get into the actual graphic, which I think everybody is here to discuss. So let's talk about STaaS. We focus on STaaS as a service, a storage as a service, due to its emerging relevance and transformative impact. That fits well with that aligns with our mission in terms of our insights into cutting edge technologies and market segments. helping organizations understand where their technologies fit, where their weaknesses are, and where the strategic fits are. So let's start with a very quick, what is STaaS? GigaOm's definition is it's a subscription-based model described for data storage, offering a cloud-like experience. It emphasizes flexibility, ease of system management, and provisioning aspects, particularly for on-premises infrastructure, although in today's environment, it is more and more hybrid, and some would argue it's mostly hybrid. We contrast it to the traditional models in terms of where organizations purchase, typically acquire, manage, maintain their own infrastructure. So here is the paradigm that you see. STaaS itself has evolved primarily from on-premise purchase into more of a from a capex into more of an opex, and its first iteration was leasing, and it has now moved into actual managed services. In addition to that, depending on where you're coming from, you will see STaaS as providing from the enterprise vendors like HPE, coming from the on-prem purchase and defining a cloud-like experience and addressing the hybrid cloud. Some STaaS providers have come from a cloud perspective and are working their way back into the hybrid model. So you can come to it from very different ways. Why would you use STaaS? So it really comes down to resources and capabilities to support strategic initiatives, depending on where you are at relative to your own capabilities in hybrid cloud, or resources to provide that and manage that. You're going to look at it in one manner, depending on if you're looking at modernization and optimization, or you're in some kind of transformative initiative within your company. You're going to look at it from that perspective. But here are the 5 primary reasons people move to STaaS. Hybrid cloud complexity. It is complex. So STaaS offers a streamlined approach to integrate on-premises and cloud resources. Many companies don't have those resources, the capabilities, desire, or inclination to do that, but they need to get it done for modernization or transformative reasons. That's number 1. Number 2 is cost management, clearly. Traditional CapEx models for storage are being replaced by OpEx models and moving to a consumption-based economy for flexibility and scalability. STaaS, that is at the core of STaaS. The third is operational flexibility. STaaS offers companies, organizations, the ability to scale storage resources up or down as needed, flex up, flex down. They no longer have to acquire and warehouse inventory or delay implementations or capabilities waiting on storage. So there's an operational flexibility. There's a legacy, fourth one is legacy system limitations. STaaS allows organizations, it provides a path to modernize effectively without significant upfront investment. And then finally, data growth and management. Again, STaaS offers scalability. It offers managed solutions that ease this burden. So resources and capabilities. So why now? From a maturity standpoint, let's talk about the technology itself. So this is really why now. We have sonar reports. I'm going to talk about the sonar itself. Sonar is emerging tech. You can see the timeline here. We've been doing this now for 3 years. This is our 3rd iteration. So when we started it, we were evaluating it as an early adopter. We're now at a moment where we look at it as technology adoption with limited risk and high ROI. And why is that? Well, hardware has matured. Flash memory is much more predictable. Modern storage is also has greater scale and redundancy. So you've got hardware maturation that enables suppliers to de-risk offering it. The software itself is, the customers have become more familiar with continuous software releases. They like the idea of getting features and functionality without extra cost, and they trust suppliers to provide that capability. And then finally, the analytics are there in order to provide things like capacity planning, performance, SLAs, SLOs. customers had become accustomed to providing those analytics to the providers, and they trust them in protecting that data. So what we really have is, let's get back to here. We have storage as a service, and we have a number of providers. As I said, it's emerging technology. So what we show here is it's really an innovation play. And what you're looking at from the providers here is three main components. The critical elements of the STaaS model itself, and then we'll get into the key criteria, Howard. Data and analytics have to be there. They're mandatory. They underpin the financial models. They work for for durability, reliability, capacity planning, etc. The management console itself, it has to be there has to be an interface between the buyer and the seller, and so you have to have a management console with analytic tools as the main user interface, and then of course management services. Some folks like to have their STaaS managed all the way by the provider. Others have a hybrid model. And so there's a flexibility in management services. So if you're looking for a cloud experience, if you're looking for cost control, and if you're looking for elastic IT or seasonality around IT in order to flex up and down, STaaS is a model that you want to consider. And here are your providers. HPE is shown here, coming from the platform play. They are a leading provider. They are the leading enterprise provider. In fact, what you'll see here is all the vendors here are coming mostly from storage providers, possibly and likely CapEx and on-prem, moving toward cloud and offering the cloud-like experience relative to hybrid cloud or cloud itself. All but one of them are in that camp. Zadara was formed as STaaS only, and it was formed as a cloud operational model. The positions on this chart are based on the capabilities that we have defined here. Here's your key. There you go. All right. So based on the key characteristics provided here, we place our providers into that Sonar report that you see. So what I'd like to point out here very, very quickly is we've limited it to 8 for the Sonar. The first 3 are effectively business criteria, and the last 5 are technical capabilities. What we see here from the 4 providers is a little bit of a difference between HPE, NetApp, Pure Storage, and Zadara, all of those in that quadrant with HPE. And there's reasons for that. HPE is focusing on the technical capability. They're integrating GreenLink with the hybrid cloud capabilities, and so they are strongest in the technical functionality, and they are less strong, let's say, compared to a Zadara in the business capability. But I would argue that the business capabilities like initial commitment, cost and billing, and expansion are all negotiable. And so what you're really after is how strong is your technical capability to deliver in terms of comparatives. And if you are interested in ecosystems and integrations, the far right column, you'll find that HPE has got capabilities over the other providers like Pure Storage and Zadara, at least those 2. If you're looking for ease of use, which is more in the middle of that table, again, HP is very, very capable there, as are Pure and Zadara. But NetApp is, you might want to assess NetApp in a different way in terms of if that's important to you from your operational or your capability standpoints, you're going to look at HPE over that particular provider. So that's the way you would read this table. It's really a selection table. It's a capabilities table that if it's important to your business or your operation, who is going to best serve those? HP is strong across the board, and they come from an enterprise platform play where they're a full service provider. So from a business standpoint, they've got some capabilities and flexibilities that you may be able to leverage to overcome what might be an objection in the first 3 columns relative to other providers. Beyond that, I'm not going to say much more about the sonar itself. I would say uh, HP is well positioned and they're very, very capable. Howard, do you have anything to add before we move on?
If I was to run more storage locally, right, my data center, my environment, STaaS would be on the top of my list, right? The goal is to start taking those things that are difficult to predict, and storage growth is difficult to predict, and align them to a cost model that gives the most benefit back to my organization, right? So when I think about that as a CIO, that's really what I'm looking for. I expect my technical people, my engineering team, to tell me, do the capabilities exist that we need to operate the business? And really, what I'm looking at this point is, as the CIO role transitions from technical management to significantly more vendor management, how do I find a vendor partner that's going to work with me, that's going to align with my business, where I can create those tight relationships? And how do I align the financial model to what my finance team is really looking for? And so those are the things that I'm looking at. It's why STaaS I think is more and more and more important as our companies change and evolve.
So that's what this report is meant to capture, is not only how we got to where we're at, strengths, challenges, and capabilities of the providers. It's not a feature comparative. It is an operational and a functionality and an acquisition comparative that you can use, as Howard said, from the end user standpoint. So with that, Tim, I'm going to, unless you've got questions, I'm going to consider that is what the sonar is,
Great,
what it is meant
great.
to be.
No, that was a great overview, Daryl. And I think now that we have a basic understanding about the sonar, we can double click into some of the topics covered in the report. So, so I'd like to kick things off by asking you about the level of control that customers are comfortable with. Um, from HPE's perspective, our customers, we know, are definitely shifting from a cloud first to a cloud everywhere approach. And we know that because among our top 100 customers, 80% have adopted our GreenLake platform. We also maintain a 96% customer retention rate, which is based on the quality of our managed services and support. And what I'm curious about is if you're also seeing that across the industry. And I guess more specifically, Howard, I'll start with you. Do you sense any hesitation from STaaS customers or buyers about relinquishing granular management or control of their infrastructure to a storage vendor?
I absolutely am, and I think much like other pieces of control, it's a false sense of security that ultimately we just need to relinquish. We need to get out of the habit of I have control over the hardware, and therefore I have a higher level of control. The fact of the matter is, we tend to exchange control for efficiency. We tend to exchange control for optimization, right? And that's one thing that the cloud has shown us. We're all used to using the cloud now to operate our business. We're used to software as a service to operate our business, and we have very, very, very little control over that. So the fact that this stuff may end up in your data center should not concern you about the level of control, right? Rather, look at that as an opportunity to improve those relationships. The role of IT is becoming more and more and more vendor management and relationship management, and it should. So while I do think customers do worry about it, I do not think you should be worried about it.
Okay, Daryl, do you agree?
I absolutely agree. Although there you can kind of assess the vendors across, relative to that level of control you're looking for. How flexible are they in working with you on a hybrid model or a management services model, for instance? Or it depends on where they're coming from. So if you want to take a look at the maturity of the offerings across the vendors as as a criteria in your decision in order to mitigate any of the concerns you may have, you can certainly do that. For instance, uh, uh, HPE, I'll start with HPE here, is that you're a full service provider in terms of not only data and storage, but servers and network and the services around all that in infrastructure. So you have a perspective and a maturity in terms of an enterprise capability around that. If you compare and contrast that with the maturity of Zadara, for instance, who formed strictly STaaS, that's what they do. They have a maturity in STaaS, but they don't have that view into the interoperability and the integrations as we showed in the other tables. But they also understand the cloud model. So they are able to provide almost hourly. There is no minimum commitment in some cases. It could be an hourly commitment as opposed to a capacity based commitment as most of the other providers. So depending on your perspective, your point of view, and your operational maturity, you would match that with the vendors themselves and the maturity of their offerings. A storage only provider like a Pure or a NetApp has got a maturity around that in terms of what they can provide there. For instance, Pure offers a SLAs and SLOs around sustainability and around ransomware recovery. So they're focusing on innovation in storage only. Zadara focuses on innovation primarily in the cloud and how to offer it through the cloud. HPE offers innovation around the entire platform, the entire infrastructure. And so depending on where you require your maturity, you would take a vendor selection accordingly.
Okay, so it sounds like you both believe that trusting a STaaS vendor makes sense going forward. But I'm curious, what about data security? Do storage as a service offerings provide what you need, in your opinion? What if I want to own my own destiny and manage security myself? Howard, do you think buyers should continue to trust STaaS vendors to include the required security capabilities, or are there other things to factor in?
Well, I think that's a really good question because we think about security kind of as one thing, but it's not one thing, right? Security is made up of industry best practices and the corporate requirements for security specific to the organization, right? No one should be better at configuring the industry standard security practices on, in this case, HP than HP. And so I'm less concerned there, right? Because HP's got the deep expertise within their own platform, as do all the STaaS vendors, right? I'm more concerned with how does that integration look like when I have specific needs for my organization? How do we communicate that? How do we manage that? And how do we run that? Like if I think about GRCS and really think about the GRC components of my environment and how that applies to storage, it's not a question of should I give that up to the storage vendor? It's really a question of how do I work with that storage vendor to ensure that that integration becomes seamless. I want my people to focus on the things that are critical for my organization. I don't want my people to focus on the things that really are those kind of more generic things that don't provide value nor need insight from my organization. And most of the time, I can offload that to a third party, in this case, the storage vendor. So no, I don't really have a concern with that. My concerns are much more, how fast is it? How responsive is it? What does it look like on the actual nuts and bolts of that integration?
Okay, well, Daryl, what's your viewpoint with respect to the competitive landscape? Is the best solution the one that's most robust, or the one that has the largest security ecosystem?
So I'm going to take the easy way out here and give you the answer that has been in the industry for the 50 years I've been in it, and that is it all depends. And it really depends almost exactly as Howard has positioned it. What are your capabilities? Where's your trust factor? Where are your resources? What part of it do you wish to manage or have to manage, perhaps for regulatory or other compliances? So as Howard pointed out, all the suppliers in storage as a service know their equipment fairly well, and they have data availability, data protection is part and parcel of everything they offer relative to that. But when you start reaching out beyond the organization, into your operations, into your other tools that you're using for other things like endpoint management and such. So it depends really on who the best is, and that perspective is solely dependent upon the end user and their requirements within their organization for regulations, compliance, security versus their ability to deliver that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It rings true with us too. Um, we at HPE, we cater to both. We offer the ability to manage your own environment or run it as a managed service. So if you prefer to manage data security at a very granular level on your own, you can do that. But you can also choose from uh, our GreenLake service offerings. So, for example, we offer integrated services on the GreenLake platform, spanning security like the Zerto a ransomware recovery service, for example. But then we also have other services beyond security for backup and disaster recovery and more. And in fact, I'll talk a little bit about those services in a few minutes. Did I cut anyone off? I was curious. Howard? No? Okay, great.
Well, I'll just add, STaaS
Yeah,
vendors
please.
can generally be trusted to provide robust security, backed by their expertise and compliance with industry standards. That's what they do. But a balanced approach, leveraging that expertise while maintaining control over your key security aspects, it might be the optimal solution for many organizations.
Great. So, we just talked about data security. That's always top of mind. Let's talk about some other top priorities. So, for example, at HPE, the customer feedback we've received has led us to focus on particular things like agility, ease of use, self-service. And our customers are also prioritizing things like SLA-driven quoting, AI-driven operations, flexibility across storage and pricing, and an ecosystem of integrated solutions. And that's what you see from the GreenLake service today. Howard, from your perspective, when customers discuss storage as a service, I'm curious, what topics are top of mind for them? And I'd also like to know what questions should buyers be asking that maybe they're not asking or that don't immediately come to mind.
Sure, sure. So in a traditional storage purchase, I'm looking at the total contract life, and what I'm really aiming for is what I buy on day one to serve me for day end, right? So if it's 3 years, right, what I'm looking for is to execute a storage buy that puts me in the right position for where I think I'll be at on day, what is that, 1,250, whatever it happens to be, right? That's not the case, nor should that be the case when I'm talking about STaaS. I'm talking about STaaS. I really want to be in a position for putting myself in the position to run my business for the number of days it takes to provision additional storage plus a buffer. Right? That might be as short as, what do I need for the next 3 months? What do I need for the next 6 months? Right? I want to start thinking about this much more like a cloud service and a strict consumption model. What that means is I need to have conversations around how does that change. And so a lot of my conversations are the same things I'd use for any service. How do I integrate the service into how I work? Right? Does it fit into my ITLM? Does it fit into my ticketing system? Does it fit into my analytics tools? Does it fit into my security analysis tools? Right? How do I make sure that the data that I get about the machine's operation fit into what I'm doing with data about other machines' operation? Right? It ultimately, from an operation standpoint, it needs to be invisible that it's a storage. Sorry, that it's a service. Right? And then from procurement, it also needs to be invisible from the procurement standpoint that I may have 60 iterations over that same 3 years, where in fact I probably had 3. Let's be honest, no one predicts their storage properly, right? And that's part of the issue. And so I really need to think about it from those two perspectives, right? Integration, How do I integrate it into my IT operations? And then procurement, how do I integrate it into my FinOps? Right? And how do I make sure that I understand that in a real thorough way? Additionally, there's another layer of support. Support's going to be a whole lot more personal to you than it was when you bought it and ran it on-prem, right? And so you really need to understand how you get support. How do you align the experience you had yesterday with the experience you're going to have tomorrow, right? If you had a TAM, does the TAM still exist? If you had people that came on site, do those people still come on site, right? If there's a distribution center close by, does that distribution center apply for legacy, STaaS, or both, right? And so do any of my response times change? And hopefully most of them improve.
Great. Daryl, your thoughts?
Those are all critical aspects, and so from a supplier standpoint, the top priorities that we're seeing are focused around those and then some. So Howard touched upon scalability, flexibility, scale resources up and down, touched upon the SLA and the SLO aspect, which is really, really critical. So the suppliers are looking at performance and reliability, guarantees that they can put around that, delivery capabilities around that, cost efficiency and transparency, absolutely key. Howard touched on integration and compatibility, which I think is probably the biggest concern and the highest relevancy relative to how to incorporate this into the operation. Data privacy and compliance, in addition to the cybersecurity, are focus areas. So what does all that mean? That means vendors are looking at addressing the user experience. Howard talked about it relative to procurement, to FinOps, and to operations itself, simplifying those interfaces, streamlining deployment, comprehensive and support. It is different. And so you need to understand that. Howard touched on that as well. And then some possibilities we might touch upon a little bit later, but the two big topics these days are cybersecurity and AI driven anything. Suppliers are looking at developing features along those lines. The hybrid cloud capability is critical. That is the model today. You could argue exactly what that model is, but some see it as high as 80% is what people would prefer. If not hybrid cloud, then multi-cloud. So it's not just cloud. And so strengthening those capabilities are where a lot of the focus is. And then in some regions more than others, sustainability is the issue. So suppliers are looking at eco-friendly practices and energy efficient technologies. Some are even offering SLAs around that. And then relative to your operation, do they have the reach that you need? Some might not do business in Latin America, for instance, and you may have operations in Latin America. So you need to understand that as well.
Yeah. So to add a little bit to that, right? You need to understand your business more than you did in the past, right? How your business operates, what the capabilities are that matter to you, and it really should be a pull. It should be you requesting from the vendor, not the vendor pushing to you. There are a lot of interesting new features that are being built into STaaS, right? But you need to make sure that they align with your strategy. So think through the things that are really critical to you, and then the remainder should help inform your strategy. Right? Maybe today we're not multi-cloud, but will you be tomorrow? Right? Is your preferred cloud? Is that also the preferred cloud of the storage vendor? Do they have a preferred cloud? Right? They may operate equally well in the three majors and not so well in the next four kind of secondary providers, right? Does that align with your corporate strategy? Does that align with your IT strategy? Right? And start asking those questions. And remember, it needs to be a pull, right? Don't get pushed into features that you don't really need and don't know how to take advantage of today. Have the conversation so you're aware of them, but don't make decisions based on features that aren't important to you. Make decisions based on the things that are important to you. And again, important to you is based on your strategy. So if you've got an 18-month strategy, it's based on the end of the 18 months. If you've got a 3-year strategy, it's based on the end of the 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You know, let's go back to the characteristics you talked about, Daryl, in the Sonar report, you listed 8 different key characteristics affecting enterprise adoption, and you provided ratings for each vendor. Actually, let me start with Howard. I'm curious, um, which of these characteristics do you consider to be the 3 or 4 most important to decision makers, and why?
Um, so ease of use, integration, and kind of initial barrier to entry / agility. Right, those are by far the big three. Right, we're going to change the way we operate something that we've been very comfortable operating for likely decades. Right, storage is such a core component. And now we're saying you're not going to operate storage the way you did before. So the new way to operate must be easy to use, because I have teams of people, likely plural, that have to be brought along. Right. So that kind of people change control is always going to be tough. So the lower that barrier of entry is, the more important. Integrations, again, it's now got to integrate into my modern IT operating model. And that can be as simple as my ticketing system, my TLM system, but may also include, integrating into Splunk, right? Integrating it into my larger data platform, right? And so I really need to think about, how do those integrations work? And then finally, it comes right back to the financials, right? If this doesn't have a financial benefit, then what is the clear benefit for me? So the goal really is to align it. And so I really need to understand those financials and how easy they are to transact and how rapidly we can transact, so that we're aware of those things and can plan accordingly.
Okay, so Daryl, I'm curious, when you look across the vendor landscape today, do you see different vendors focusing on all 8 categories and trying to maximize their potential across all of them? Or do you see them prioritizing certain categories?
So um, technology is all about leapfrog and trade-offs, and so clearly there's a prioritization implied in there, if not expressly um, delivered. It is difficult to be good in everything. If you're trying to be good in everything, you're probably average in everything. And so there is focus, and it is trade-off. So I do see some prioritization, and I'll go back to the table, in that we had 8 criteria, but 3 of those were business oriented, 5 of those were technology oriented. So depending on where you're coming from, that almost dictates where your prioritization default matrix is. As I mentioned, one of the providers was born in STaaS, born in the cloud. And so they are prioritizing, they prioritized early on those capabilities in terms of the business acquisitions, the flexibilities, the commitments, or the actual cloud interfaces and the cloud operations. They are now hustling as a priority to get into the hybrid cloud, multi-cloud world. HPE comes from an infrastructure standpoint, decades of that experience, and with legacy customers on-prem, and so the prioritizations there have been to maintain that enterprise discipline, that maturity, and integrate it and rush toward the cloud and prioritize that capability, but not over pivot so far as to be it's now cloud, because the environment is now multi-cloud or hybrid cloud. So the prioritization for HPE has been there, and you can see it in the GreenLake offering. So absolutely, folks prioritize differently, not only on where they came from, but what they're trying to get to, and how they are going to respond to the operational aspects that Howard just relayed. So some of them are going to be more customer oriented. Some of them will be coming from a position of being behind or being focused on just one thing, just on the cloud or just on storage. Storage focus is a good thing in this case. We're talking about storage as a service. But if you've got a history of looking at it from a more holistic standpoint, as someone like an HPE would have, you'd have some prioritizations around maintaining that and not letting that suffer as well. So it keeps coming down to it depends, Tim. but it is a trade-off business, and every provider is making those trade-offs, not only from their de-risking or their ability to supply, but also in terms of what their particular customer sets and what they're addressing are trying to drive to.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how the chart, the 8 characteristics in the ratings do show, they show off where vendors are trading off, as you say. For our solutions at HPE, I think the ratings in the Sonar report align very well with our priorities. We don't want to sacrifice technical and operational capabilities for other, to take advantage of other characteristics. From our buyer standpoint, some of the key aspects that they prioritize are, multi protocol flexibility, the ability to purchase just the capacity they need, and avoid over or under provisioning. Um, Self-service management is another key differentiator. And then we also offer 100% data availability for mission critical apps. And I think that's something you don't always see from competitive offerings.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
no, go on, please.
You mentioned some of the financials and the flexibility on consumption and that flexibility. You can sometimes tell where their priorities are based upon the terms and conditions that they make the offering. For instance, if my minimum commit is 250 terabytes, do I really want certain customers that cannot commit to that? Or am I doing that 250 terabyte commit because of, protecting my own interests in terms of investment? And, so the priority becomes, in that case, um, who am I actually serving? Which customer set am I serving? Or am I actually de-risking or mitigating my own risk, and putting a toe in the water, if you will? So it's not only, if you're an enterprise discipline company, you're going to be looking at exactly what you said, 100% data availability. It's all about the data. You're storing it after all, and you're storing it as a service. So you have stewardship of that, and the custodial and fiduciary responsibilities in that. So the priorities that you can imply into customers come around what they're offering.
At the same time, right, there are two things that Tim talked about that I think most customers need to take a second look at. The first is literally everything comes at a cost, right? The flexibility of these as a service offerings allow us to do things that may have been more complicated in the past. And so I would really take a look at, while 100% data availability is logically the thing you want, do you actually need that in all of your data?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is no. I guarantee you don't need it on all of your data. So think about, where do I pay for this? Where do I not pay for this? And then the same is true for anything else, right? When you start looking at specific applications and the performance of specific applications, right, get a little bit granular with it, right? That application that you claim to be a gold or platinum level application, is it really? Does it really require that level of redundancy, that level of resiliency, that level of data protection? Right? And really start thinking about, what does that matrix look like, and how do I think about my applications, and how do I push back? Because in the past, we struggled to do a show back. With STaaS, we're paying for it as a cloud service. So it becomes a whole lot easier to report on that application and how that application is configured and how that application costs us. And you can really start to push back on your organization and the people in the org that claim this thing is so important. You go, great, well, here's the cost difference between those two things. Do you really want to pay for it?
Yep.
Right.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it starts to become second nature in a way that wasn't before. So I really suggest use STaaS as an opportunity to help bump your maturity forward and bump how you think about these things forward. One final question that I would add, again, kind of relates to what you guys were saying. If I'm paying for exactly the storage that I'm using, and it is on-prem, I also need to think about the spare capacity on hand. Right? While it's likely to burst to the cloud and I won't have any service interruption, that doesn't solve the problem that that may not be as performant. And so really think about, is it a 20% additional on-prem commit, right? And that's another place where you can likely negotiate. If you expect your organization to be dynamic and your growth to be dynamic, you might want to look at those T's and C's and say, hey, we don't actually think 20% is going to be good enough for us. We might want to push for 25 or 30%. And then you'll likely be in a position where you have to review it after 6 months and go, hey, you said you needed a 25, 30%. You've only grown 7%, right? We're not comfortable with us, the vendor, paying for that to be on-prem, right? And you can have that conversation. But really, like, keep in mind, this is not, you're not purchasing from Azure or GCP or AWS where there isn't really no negotiation. There's a lot more negotiation in this. Think of the negotiation very similar to how you thought about just a traditional purchase in the past.
It's absolutely the case. There's no likely point of negotiation that ends up being one of the primary points, Howard, from a supplier standpoint. The other thing that I believe you can do as a buyer is you now have what you're buying resources and you're buying capabilities that you may not likely have had on hand to begin with. So you can push those resources, you can push those capabilities, you can anticipate that they're going to have some capabilities that you may not have had, and now you can push for those in the offering itself. So not only a negotiation standpoint, but the actual offering itself in terms of multi-protocols, this whole capacity planning capability or any other service you can think of that you would have liked to have had in your staff and that you may now likely have in your new staff.
Great, great point. Um, you brought up some issues in the past, Howard. That's a good segue to talking about the future. I'm curious about what you think the future is going to bring with respect to storage as a service. And I'll go first with what we're working on. In the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see enhancements aimed at reducing operational complexity. We also want to establish a common hardware platform for our next gen STaaS offerings. And that platform is based on a disaggregated, software defined scale up or scale out architecture. And you're also going to see continued focus on data services for protection, security, and compliance. So, from your perspective, Howard, uh, what should end users be focused on in terms of future enhancements?
So the first would be a real focus on security. And I don't mean the security capabilities within the platform. I think the next generation of conversation is really around, how does my vendor manage security internally? What does their kind of DevSecOps look like? And how does that affect the core of the platform and the reliability of the platform? Right. Today, we talk a lot about security as in the security features within the platform. Tomorrow, we need to be talking about the security of that supply chain and how that affects us, and getting a better integration between customers and vendors. The second one, really, AI is not going away, and storage has a huge impact on AI. Right. So how are the vendors going to start enabling integrations that leverage AI within the data that I have? Because it is costly to continually move data from place to place. And so I want to get that as near to where the data is stored as possible. Right. And then the third is a continuing integration into my operations and automation of that operations. Right. We talk a lot about AI ops today. What we're really going to look for tomorrow is AI ops is here, it is running, it is working. And so what are the kind of quick start things that vendors are going to give us to integrate with our AI ops? And they're going to start almost being more of a push than a pull. Today, it's very much a pull. Tomorrow, I want them to be more of a push. I want the expectation to be, this is a partnership where you're helping my maturity grow over time and really pointing me in the direction of things that you've seen successful with other customers, to help me be more successful. So those are kind of the three big ones that I'd be looking at for kind of future opportunities and future growth. When I say that, I don't mean future like 6 months from now. Right. I mean future like 18 months from now, 24 months from now. Again, it has to align with my strategy and my maturity, but those are really the places where I'd like to see more conversation and more future growth.
What do you think, Daryl?
Those are three great ones. The AI one is an interesting one in that you might have something along the lines of storage aware data and data aware storage. So you can automate the data lifecycle management, optimizing storage efficiency and reducing costs. And there's some opportunity there. So you can't talk about futures without talking about AI or data protection, cybersecurity, and expanding it into the supply chain is critical, because you would be doing that as an end user yourself if you were managing your own storage. Why wouldn't you ask that of your STaaS providers? It should become easier to use. But I think in a lot of these things, it's going to become more complex because there's a ton of areas for innovation. Howard talked about a couple of them. One of the integration might be in edge computing. How do you integrate that? Clearly, you're going to see improved multi-cloud and hybrid cloud support. Uh, this idea of sustainability is politically charged, but it is this whole idea of green and energy efficient. We can't have unlimited, unmitigated, unconstrained growth without having an impact on the ability to supply power to drive that. So sustainability certainly would be a focus. Automation, self-service, another area of innovation. Like I said, it's a target-rich environment. You can always do things with business and pricing models, granularity, pay-per-use, etc. One that is probably a little bit further out than 2 or 3 years that Howard mentioned is integrating quantum computing, and how long, how that will come about. And I would argue that HPE, being in that server business, is going to be on the leading edge of that. But there will be that will revolutionize data processing and storage capacities, because now you have unconstrained compute resources. What if you had unlimited bandwidth and infinite capacity? What would that look like? So there are technologies out there that are just coming out that are going to impact data and storage medium. And there are compute and networking capabilities out there that are either required or emerging as well. And I would suggest HPE, being a full service provider, is going to be in the middle of all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these are really interesting insights, and I wish we had more time to keep going through the conversation. Across your responses, it's really interesting that something that's generally so well understood as storage as a service can still have nuances and unforeseen issues that you need to understand well before ultimately choosing a vendor. And as we were talking, I provided a little bit of information about HPE's GreenLake STaaS offering. So, what I'd like to do now is take just a few minutes to explain what GreenLake as a service is all about and why it's growing so fast. Um, so, the HPE GreenLake for block storage service provides a self-service cloud experience everywhere. And this allows our customers to simplify operations, eliminate complexity, and transform faster, all while maintaining control of their data on-prem. Um, Based on self-service capabilities and role-based access, you can empower users to easily deploy apps and self-provision storage without the need to engage the IT team. You can also run your applications without compromise because you can deploy apps based on your desired SLA. Furthermore, as we talked about earlier, we guarantee 100% data availability for mission critical app environments and 6 nines of availability for all other workloads. What we're essentially providing to customers is the ability to make the shift from owning data infrastructure to simply accessing and utilizing it. Now, we offer a simple, flexible, as a service consumption model that allows you to move from heavy upfront costs to a transparent, predictable monthly subscription. We can deliver workload optimized storage tiers in days. You can then scale on demand, and you can take advantage of buffer capacity, which Howard was talking about earlier, to manage unexpected workloads or usage demands. So in terms of value, with our as a service model, your project deployment times are going to shorten, you're going to free up capital, and you're going to be able to align your spending better with your business needs. Now, when it comes to enabling agility, we start with streamlined device deployment. All you need to do is rack the infrastructure, plug in the power cords, and connect the network cables. And then with a few clicks, you can configure the new system and get ready to support application workloads. You can then use intent-based provisioning to provision storage for those application workloads. And then you can manage your storage environment from any device, anywhere, and new features and enhancements can be delivered invisibly. So I mentioned intent-based provisioning just a moment ago. That process transforms storage provisioning from a LUN-centric manual process to an intent-based AI-driven approach. All you need to do is specify the storage tier, the workload type, the required capacity, the protection or replication policy, and the groups that need access to that workload. The intent-based provisioning service then determines where data should be stored and replicated, including consideration for the headroom that you might require and application-specific SLAs. So for your line of business admins and your database admins and your developers, they don't need storage domain expertise in order to provision storage, and the provisioning time can then be reduced from days or weeks to just minutes. So what I want to remind you is that the infrastructure is owned by HPE, but operated by your team. The service is based on a flexible subscription model, but if you prefer a fully managed service, that's available too. Now, you can globally monitor and manage your entire fleet of block storage from a single cloud console that's accessible from any location, from any device. Our cloud native control plane scales autonomously with your infrastructure wherever the infrastructure is located across the world. And this means managing hundreds of systems across geographies is really just as simple as managing one. Another benefit of HPE storage as a service is that new data services instantly become available. Cloud delivered data plane software upgrades or firmware upgrades can be delivered on a schedule or transparently at the fleet level. It's an automated, non-disruptive, and policy-driven process. Data-driven intelligence is provided through HPE InfoSight. Based on the AI-driven recommendations from InfoSight, disruptions can be predicted and prevented before they occur across the stack, and issues can be pinpointed between storage and VMs, as well as underutilized virtual resources. Now, when you invest in HPE GreenLake for block storage, you also gain access to a broad catalog of cloud native data infrastructure and cloud services, and they include cloud infrastructure services to ease infrastructure management through cloud operations. You can also use cloud data services like Zerto, ransomware recovery service, and HPE backup and recovery service to help manage the lifecycle of data across edge to cloud. And you can also take advantage of services like HPE InfoSight and HPE Cloud Physics that provide AI for autonomous operations. All of these services are delivered as a service or as a subscription experience through our HPE GreenLake cloud platform. Now, beyond storage, if you need compute, networking, database, HPC, containers, AI, VDI, or third-party application access, the good news is that these too can be delivered as a service through HPE GreenLake. So to recap, The benefits of HPE GreenLake for block storage include self-service agility based on intent-based provisioning, and that translates to a 98% operational time savings. You get a cloud experience everywhere, along with 100% data availability for mission critical applications. And with HPE InfoSight, you can spend less time firefighting because 86% of problems can be predicted and automatically resolved before you even become aware of them. And these are just some of the reasons why we think we were rated so well in and as a leader in the GigaOM Sonar report for storage as a service. So with that, I invite you to post any questions that you have. So Scott?
Yeah. So yeah, we do have a couple of questions in here. We've probably got time for a few. This first one here, they're wondering, are there STaaS shortcomings? And another way to put it is, when is STaaS the best choice, and under what circumstances does STaaS not make sense? So, Tim, to start with you, are there risks there?
Yeah, we're heavily, we've invested heavily in as a service offerings, but if you want to build and manage your own infrastructure, as I said earlier, of course, that's possible. Maybe some of the reservations about STaaS in general might be in terms of how much customization is possible with a STaaS solution, or maybe there might be some partnership related challenges in case you require the integration of a very particular partner application or solution with your STaaS infrastructure. Howard, what do you think?
A financial model can be a risk, right? I've worked at organizations where even today, they really favor a capex model, and finance won't allow capex to be used for services. So that's really the only one. That's becoming more and more rare, but there are still organizations that heavily favor capex.
Daryl?
I would agree with that, with both of you on that. It really comes down to, you've got the same concerns that you would have just generally going to the public cloud. You just can't walk away from the infrastructure. You still need to understand it. You're still using it. You still have a business use that you have to cater to. So you have to assess the ability of the suppliers to meet what you are looking for, in addition to understanding what you are capable of delivering yourself. And so that there's a monitor going on. There's a shared responsibility, if you will. It's not, I'm now STaaS and I can go do something else. Seasonality is another one, frankly. And that's why you have the model you have, the elasticity and the flex up, flex down. But you need to understand that so you can prepare for that.
Okay, excellent. Another question here. It mentioned that it's interesting that small companies often target large established vendors as being the elephants in the industry. But if you look at the Sonar diagram, the majority of vendors plotted are those types of vendors. So I guess I'll direct this one to Howard. Why is that, and how do smaller companies make an impact?
Well, storage requires a level of maturity anyhow, right? There's nothing in your environment that's more critical than your storage. Nothing. No IT component. If the network is flaky, if the network goes down, if I don't get the performance, if it's hard to configure, great. That's about availability, right? But if my data suddenly vanishes, if my data isn't reliable, the company has no faith in me, and the business will likely cease to operate. So the barrier for entry to deliver a quality storage product is already complex. Add on to that the as a service requirements, right? And it does become a really complex offering in a way that most things don't have the same level of complexity, right? In order to offer storage as a service, you have to have a reasonably high level of globalization, right? I have to be able to respond both virtually and physically in a significant way to be able to maintain the quality necessary for my customers to get what they need, right? And so that's why you're going to see a lot of the kind of the legacy players play in STaaS and score so well, because they're already established. They already build really excellent, high quality storage, right? They have the globalization necessary, and they're able to deliver that while adding on those kind of cloud-like features and functions that turn it into that turn it into a service. Let's also not forget, you're financing effectively a very large purchase and turning that into a service. You still have to be able to financially transact properly. In order to do that, it also requires companies that have tight relationships with financial institutions. And a lot of these companies have had that for decades, being in kind of the leasing game and the leasing business. And so being able to build those transactions requires almost a business unit by itself. So while we see a lot of new entrants in a lot of other as a service spaces within storage, it's not at all surprising that the legacy vendors play really, really well in storage as a service. Matter of fact, it's almost more surprising that Sedata is able to do it to the level that they're able to do it.
Daryl, your thoughts?
Howard nailed it. It's what they do. It's what they care about. It's what they know. Some of them have been doing it since 1956, so that they understand it. It is, what Howard talked about relative to the surprising aspect is that they're able to get into that game as quickly as they have and be as flexible as they are. That's generally not how they move. They are risk averse. But having said that, I would suggest they know the trails better. They know how to globalize. They know the commitments required for interoperability and compliance and sovereignty. They operate in the areas of the world more so than the smallers. The smallers, their agility is based on other things. For instance, commitments, as I mentioned earlier. They're kind of a cloud consumption model. That's where they're focused. The traditional vendors are focused on data. It is the lifeblood.
Yeah, I think I can draft off what both of you said. We're very different at HPE from smaller vendors, because we're much more than just a storage company. I think the question STaaS buyers are, the question they generally need to ask is, who will you trust with your business? And from our perspective, we're not going to let you put your enterprise at risk. We have an enterprise discipline approach that, as you said, like other large vendors, we've developed over many years. And we also offer a range of products and solutions for cradle to grave data lifecycle management and data protection, along with a lot of experience and expertise, not just across HPE, but our partners as well. And these are the types of benefits that are especially compelling, I think, if you're running mission critical applications in your organization, or if you have a very large data management infrastructure.
So, Tim, that's an important point. It comes down to trust. I'm going to make a statement here. If you knew what went on in these data storage devices, you probably wouldn't put a lick of data on them. And so you need to have people that know what that is. It's how to store, but as importantly, how to retrieve, how to manage, secure, protect, and have a passion for it.
Good point.
Great thought there. Probably to wrap up here, Tim, just, is if people want to get started with, HPE GreenLake storage as a service, or learn more about the STaaS market, what do you recommend?
Yeah, if you want to learn more about the STaaS market, definitely download GigaOm's Sonar report for storage as a service. In fact, we've provided a link in this platform. I also invite you to download HPE's Storage as a Service Buyer's Guide, which is also available from this platform. And of course, there's a lot more information available at the HPE website.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, excellent discussion. I know I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has as well. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Okay, and before we wrap up, we have two more pieces of business. We've got a quick poll for you. In addition to the great resources in the handout section, this is an opportunity to get additional resources from HPE about GreenLake and the HPE STaaS solution. So just mark off as many of the resources as you'd like to receive, including the data sheet, technical white paper, customer case study, pricing details, personal demo, if you'd like to try it for yourself, if you're already a customer of the STaaS solution, or nothing at this time. And while we leave that poll up for you, just to give everybody time to get in all the things that they want to get in, our last item is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is Claire Stephanie from California. Congratulations to Claire. We'll be in touch to get you your card. All right, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Hewlett Packard Enterprise and GigaOM for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.